Welcome to Andy Decodes. Sit back and enjoy as we dive deeper down into the rabbit hole.
Hello and welcome to the show. This evening I'm joined by the wonderful Paul Blake Smith. Now, Paul is the author of two books. The first one, President Eisenhower Close Encounters, and the second one is, I'll just get it up on screen, the Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter. So welcome to the show, Paul, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here.
No, our pleasure entirely. So, as we were saying, this is the latest book that you've just put out. You say it's been out of 3-4 months?
That's correct. May the 8th it came out.
Yeah. So we'll start off with where you can get this, and we'll keep doing that throughout the show. So you're saying that at the moment you can only get it on Amazon.
Right.
That seems to be the only place.
Tell people there's 3 places you can get it: Amazon, Amazon, and Amazon. That's the main place, and it's easy to order and to get it from a major, huge corporation. And if you're a real pal to old Polly, you'll leave a positive review too.
Yes. So do you want to start by telling us why you wrote this book? The reason behind it?
Yeah, it began as a natural sequel to my most recent book from 2020 called President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. Of course, well, I say of course, but many people living today are not aware that Richard M. Nixon was Vice President of the United States under President Dwight David Eisenhower, who was quite popular in his day, both in the United Kingdom, where he helped lead the Supreme Allied effort to win World War II, and in America, where he became a U.S. president, winning 2 landslide elections. So I put together a lot of research on Dwight Eisenhower and how I believe, quite seriously, that he planned a golf vacation after 1 year in office and snuck away from that vacation one night in Palm Springs and flew to Edwards Air Force Base and met with some friendly human-like aliens that landed out at Edwards Air Force Base runway. Supposedly they came down in 5 ships, 3 circular, 2 elongated, spoke to Ike in English, and they came to an agreement. So if we flash forward 19 years, Richard Nixon was then president. Dwight Eisenhower had just passed away a few years earlier. Nixon was king of the hill. He was the only living American president at the time. In February of 1973, he snuck off on a golf vacation, this one in Florida. And supposedly, and I believe it's true, he went to an Air Force base and he saw some extraterrestrial evidence. And he took his golfing buddy, comedian Jackie Gleason, with him. And they all got quite an eyeful that night. And then Jackie told too much to his wife as soon as he got home. But it makes for a terrific story. And in researching both books, I was quite astonished that there's no books out previously on these 2 popular subjects that you may read about in a paragraph or 2 in a UFO book or on somebody's website. I'm thinking, where's the book on this? So I researched it a great deal, put in a ton of evidence, circumstantial, and a little government document in the back, in the appendix of my books, that shows that the story is real. And I believe I can convince you in the court of the popular opinion there. If you read the book all the way through, I got a lot of good reviews for Eisenhower, and I'm starting to mount some up for the Nixon book, that this is convincing and it did happen. That some of our U.S. presidents know far more than they let on about extraterrestrial visitation.
Yeah. So, which one was it that went for a supposed emergency dental appointment?
Yeah, that was the Eisenhower story.
Right, I thought it was.
Yeah. And I looked into that, and that's been commonly referred to as the night that he went to meet with extraterrestrials. I found out that it was the night before that incident that he really did have a dental problem, that he bit into some duck meat at a dinner, and there was still buckshot in the meat, and it broke off one of the caps on his tooth. And so the people at this dinner in Palm Springs rang up their dentist, and the dentist said, "Oh, yeah, sure. The president of the United States needs me. Yeah, right. I'll be right over to my office." And he went back to sleep. And they rang him after like an hour. "Where are you? The president's waiting." And that the story is true. Eisenhower was out half the night, first for that dentist, and second, getting treatment for this broken crown off his tooth. So that it was actually the night before, a Friday night, February 19th, 1954, that a big party was arranged for the press in Palm Springs to divert their attention away from Eisenhower ducking out at night and taking a short flight to Edwards Air Force Base. And you get more details of that in the book, partly from a gentleman who was there, said he was there. He was a retired U.S. Air Force test pilot who said, "I was called in for my aerodynamic expertise." He knew about flight. He was a test pilot of the latest technology that America had in '54, and he was quite trusted. He did not wish to give his name, but he confessed all that he knew, because he said, "I've learned the last eyewitness to this amazing event has died, and I don't want the story to die out." So he told it in the early 1980s, and that also helps to lend credence and give details about what happened that night.
Ah, that's very interesting, because I'd always read that this dentist visit was just the cover-up to what was actually going on behind closed doors.
That's right. I looked into that, and I found that not to be true, that it's actually a valid story. And Eisenhower was pretty grumpy about that, because he wanted his tooth fixed, and it took way too long. There are some dental records that he consulted Dr. Francis Purcell of Palm Springs that night. And the Eisenhower Presidential Library has an historian that just laughs at this idea that he was out with extraterrestrials that night, because he really did get his tooth treated, and there's records of this. But as I say, it was the night before, when this was carefully set up, that the press was diverted by this big party, and he managed to go out at night, first driven to an airfield, and then he either took a plane or a helicopter out to a small town near Edwards, and was driven the last few miles to the air base, where airbase officials had been in consultation with these friendly humanoids that had landed that afternoon. They checked out the story and found that the aliens were everything they said they were, and they were quite friendly and unarmed, and just wanted to meet the leader of the free world. They had a very good motivation, in my opinion, for wanting to meet Eisenhower, and I can tell you about that. But as I mentioned, they came down in the afternoon in 3 ships that were far more advanced than our jet planes in America then and now, and that they stepped out and were somewhat human in appearance. I call them like cousins of human beings. And I've, since the book came out in 2020 on the Eisenhower affair, I've read a number of accounts from scientists online who are now seriously speculating there are many Earth-like planets in the cosmos. And on these Earth-like planets, human life evolves and shapes and forms human beings much like us. And these are very serious, learned educators. They may not believe that we have been visited by aliens, but they are convinced that it is very possible that human beings exist in the this galaxy perhaps, but in the many many galaxies beyond our Milky Way, and that, who knows, some could be less advanced than we are, or much more advanced and having mastered spaceflight. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what this witness said at the Eisenhower encounter of 54, that these were very human-like creatures who spoke in English, were aware of our customs and our language and our history, and they were very concerned about one big thing. We're making a mess of this planet. We're polluting it and making matters worse with atomic detonation contamination. That we had an atomic bomb testing program that Eisenhower was carrying out. And we are pouring this contamination into the atmosphere, even up into outer space, in our seas, in our land. It's just awful. And they urged Eisenhower, could you please stop this reckless atomic bomb testing? So I think that's pretty good motivation to land and want to speak to the man in charge. Eisenhower himself had a pilot's license, and he knew a good deal about how to fly an airplane and about aerodynamics himself. So who better to speak with than Dwight Eisenhower, maybe the most popular person on the planet at the time.
Yeah. So do you know any of the conversation that was had other than that between the president and these?
Yes, indeed. According to the eyewitness, the aliens offered to begin educating humanity to awareness that humans are not alone in the universe and that some are able to come here. This education program would try to wake up people to the fact that we are not alone and being visited. And Eisenhower wasn't too thrilled about that.
Right.
And he said, well, how can we stop you? You're so advanced. That's according to a man named Don Phillips, who worked for the Skunk Works aerodynamics and flight technology company here in America. He said, I was shown this file. It's top secret, but it was necessary for the advancement of this stealth technology we were working on. And he says, by golly, in it, it said Eisenhower did meet with friendly human-like aliens. And he said, we can't stop you. We're going to have to come to some sort of agreement that you're not going to sit down in front of people, that you're not going to touch off a panic. We don't need social disorder in America or any other nation. Could you please not sit down like you just did here in Edwards Air Force Base? He was deathly afraid of the October 1929 stock market crash, that anything that could give Wall Street the jitters, like aliens landing and changing our way of life dramatically, could send the stock market into a free fall and put people out of work in a kind of domino effect down the line and damage the world economy that depends upon the American economy. So this was a huge reason why Eisenhower said, could you not show yourselves too much, and stay at arm's length, and we'll come to an agreement about we'll set up a place where you can land and where we can exchange a little technology in private, which they apparently did in Nevada, out in the desert in America. Now, this information comes from a leaked 1989 Defense Intelligence Agency report from January of 89, apparently put together for the new George H.W. Bush administration. And Reagan was in office at the time. It was obviously a kind of briefing for newcomers. And in this document, it again says Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials 3 times. And once was in 54 in February, another during that summer, and again in February of 55. So I looked all of this up. And there are openings in Mr. Eisenhower's schedule, there's the book, that leave it possible that he could have gone and done these things, as astounding as they are. And there were a number of leaks at the time that people started whispering about this because it's so amazing and exciting. And it was even broadcast over the radio in America. And the man who did so, Frank Edwards, was soon fired from the Mutual Broadcast System. What a coincidence, huh?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it always seems to be the way, doesn't it? As soon as somebody mentions something to do with anything like this, they're let go, shall we say?
It was tightly controlled then. It is somewhat controlled now, but we've all got our cell phones out and people taking footage of various encounters and objects, lights and
Yeah.
such. And I know some videos can be hoaxed, but when
Yeah.
you start having multiple views of the same sighting, and you have jet pilots coming forward now on national television saying, we see these darn things almost every day, orbs,
Yeah.
tic tac like objects darting about with no propulsion system visible. We see discs, triangular craft. They're starting to step forward and say, yeah, this is going on. We are being visited. So I'm hoping that we will see more of this in the future. And we had congressional hearings here in America in which some whistleblowers came forward and said, we are recovering crashed objects and bodies, and we have had open contact with some friendly aliens. And I'm thinking, bingo, that's what I've been writing about for the past 4 or 5 years at least. So I'd like to see more come through. It'd be good for book sales, but it helps to confirm and justify why I spent all this time researching this and putting it into book form. It's just the most amazing, fun story. I'm just amazed when I run into people. The majority of folks are curious.
Yeah.
And you still get people like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to talk about that. Their minds just snap shut. It frightens them.
Closed.
Or they're very, very skeptical, or they're closed-minded, as you say. And so not everyone is open, but it's getting better.
Yeah, we're getting there. But just going back to what you said about these whistleblowers, do you think that was controlled? And if so, how much control was given?
I'm told that it was. The main star witness is a man named David Grush, and he came to an agreement with like the Defense Intelligence Agency or the Pentagon in saying, I can tell you some things, but I can't tell you others.
Yeah.
And there's strongly hinted, and this is pretty sad, that people in past decades who knew too much and wanted to step forward or started to step forward were rubbed out, that they were eliminated to keep this program secret. And so that's kind of scary. And I hate to say it's probably true. Certainly there's many, there are many accounts of people who now say years after the fact that they were harassed, intimidated, threatened. You keep your mouth shut. You didn't see this. It's a matter of national security. It's something that the government doesn't want getting out. And again, we go back to the Eisenhower encounter, where he did not want to start a panic that people might quit their jobs, quit their schools, quit their religious faith. And Dwight Eisenhower was a deeply devoted Christian who was the first U.S. president to be baptized in office. That's how devoted to his faith he was. And he wanted people to focus on God and the Son of God, Jesus Christ. He really did not want aliens to be openly speaking to people and being possibly worshipped and adored and their every word followed. What if they are fallible, as I'm sure they are, creatures who do make mistakes or may have slightly faulty information, whether on purpose or by accident. So you open a whole can of worms here by letting one group in. What about all the other aliens? And what if they sit down and they want their own meeting with Eisenhower or any leader of any country?
So do you think that, with you just saying that, do you think then that there possibly or was more meetings with different types that was never given out to the public?
It's possible. I think the main ones to communicate are the ones described meeting with Eisenhower. You may be familiar, and some of your viewers may be familiar with the Army Special Operations Manual 101. It's a document that leaked over 10 years ago, and it's amazingly detailed. And it mentions contact with extraterrestrials, mentions Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And it says that there are 3 types of aliens that we know of as of 54. And one was described as, surprise, very human-like, only with somewhat different skin tone, I think it said grayish, somewhat more gray than our fleshly color.
Yeah.
And that they were about 5 foot tall at most and well muscled. And they only had a little bit of scruff atop their heads as opposed to, my hair, not yours.
Yeah.
So they were a little different, but again, kind of like cousins of human beings from another world, trying to set up a cosmic family reunion, if you will. And the other two were described as, one was described as these typical grays with the big bulbous heads and the big black eyes, and that they may well be kind of biological cloned entities. And I've heard that a number of places now, that they're not quite like you and I. They may be almost like programmed servants of a higher race.
Yeah.
So they could be making contact, but I think it's the human-like ones that are trusted the most and doing a good job of handling contact in a mature manner and not going out and say, look at us, we need attention.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the Galactic Federation, if that's the right term for it?
Well, I love the TV show Star Trek, in which they work for a federation of peaceful planets. And I hope there is such a thing someday that we find out, and maybe we'll be admitted to the club. I don't know if America in particular is ready. I don't know if the world in general, our Earth, is ready, the human race. Yeah. We have a lot of violence. We have a lot of opportunistic people who take advantage of you. And that may not be allowed on other planets or allowed into a conference of other beings. So I find that idea quite tantalizing and possible, but we don't qualify for the club quite yet, is what I believe.
Right. Yeah. No, because I was just thinking, because you got Bob Bigelow that supposedly had meetings with these. I always forget the guy's name. The guy who took over Stardust Ranch in Rainbow Valley. Robert.
That's not Robert Bigelow.
No, there's Bob Bigelow from Skinwalker, and there's another guy.
I think he's had some contact with them, but I think I know of the guy you're talking about, and I can't remember his name either.
He died late last year, early this year. I'm sure it's called. I can't remember his name. I was friends with his wife on Facebook. That was Stardust Ranch, and apparently they had a meeting with all these different types of beings that come down, and there's some sort of treaty that they was gonna go through and sign up, because when he was living at Stardust, I've listened to a few interviews with him. I've read one of the books, and he said he was never more than 8 feet away from some sort of weapon in his house, because these little greys would just turn up. So he'd like see him out the corner of his eye, and he'd reach for a sword or a baseball bat or something and he's had a few encounters with him, and apparently on one of them he used one of the swords and decapitated one of the greys. The body in the head was put into a freezer, and then it was shipped off to an undisclosed location.
Mm-hmm. The guy with the sword is lucky he wasn't shipped off to an undisclosed location.
I can't think of his name. I'm sure it's Robert. No, it's gone. I'd have to look it up. But you'll know his name once they say it, or someone in the chat.
We'll call him Mr. X.
Yeah. But apparently he was met up with this intergalactic force, and all these lights just appeared in the sky, and the next thing he was surrounded by like 5 or 6 different beings, and he had some sort of meeting, and there was come to some sort of agreement that these greys wouldn't come down and hassle him anymore. There's more to it than that. I'd be here for hours talking about it if we went into it, but that was pretty much the basics of it. I just thought you might have heard of it.
That particular story I have not heard. It's quite interesting. As a writer, you're hunched over a laptop a lot. So I get neck pain, and I go to a chiropractor. My chiropractor was telling me about an old farmer here in Missouri who came to him with this strange bulbous knob on the back of his neck, and he was in a lot of pain. And the doctors can't seem to do anything for him. And the man explained that he was visited at night on his farm by these gray extraterrestrial beings while he lay in bed. And he was alone at the time, and he could see them all around, but he was paralyzed. He couldn't move. He wanted to reach for the gun near his bed that he always kept for his own protection, and he couldn't do it. And he could see these creepy little big-headed gray beings with the black eyes all around, looking at him, and they may have done something to him. And he went to a chiropractor about this strange apparatus on the back of his neck. I don't know what happened in general, but my chiropractor tells me he believes that gentleman is now deceased.
Right.
It's just an example, and I put some in a book that I'm working on right now for release this fall, of gray beings here in Missouri, in the heart of the Midwest of America, and appearing on farms, and whether they had anything to do with a 1941 UFO crash in my hometown of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So that was the first book that I wrote. And the second book also back in 2016. I'm dissatisfied with those two books, and now I'm combining them together with some new information, and I'm putting out a new book on the 1941 Missouri UFO crash for later this fall. So that's the gray beings and being looked over and such. That's a story I'm familiar with lately.
Right. Well, I've just looked up. It was John Edmonds, the owner of Stardust.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
No, I'm sure his wife's called Mary. I'm not 100% on that. It's either Mary or Margaret. It's definitely one of them two, but. Yeah, it's just with what you were saying and what you just said then is very similar to what was going on with him.
This whistleblower who spoke out bravely, if you ask me, he could lose plenty in life. He could lose his own life. And that's something that's kept people from coming forward over the decades. Let's say you work for the government and you know what's going on, or you work for the military and you know what's going on. You speak up, and not only could they jail you, there's a number of laws that I've read about that prevent you from speaking out, but you could lose your pension, your health care, your freedom. And I suppose if you know a whole lot and you go to the New York Times or something, you might lose your life. So this has been a huge problem in America and perhaps other countries as well. But maybe now the dam is breaking and we'll see more people coming forward. I would like to see individuals come forward, but I hope nobody gets hurt.
No. That's like you said before, people just, they call it suicided, don't they?
Yeah, they suddenly get depressed and kill themselves.
Yes.
That's pretty suspicious.
Yeah, because someone put in the chat about Phil Schneider, is it?
Yeah.
The underground war sort of thing, or battle, should say. He had part of his stomach blasted away with like these blue lasers, and some of his fingers were missing. And then he was found in his apartment with his colostomy bag card wrapped around his neck that apparently he'd done himself, and whatever else went on, which I don't believe at all.
Very suspicious circumstances. Hopefully we won't see a lot of that. I'll give you one that was not a suicide, but there's a story here in America of a woman who got a hold of her husband's sample rocks. Her husband was an astronaut, or at least worked with NASA, and these were moon rocks. She said government agents took the two of them down to the ground and roughed them up in a parking lot as they left a restaurant, and took their moon rocks and, bullied and threatened them and such over a bag of rocks. That's how scary it can be if you're dealing with people who want secrets kept, and they're willing to get physical with you, even an older lady. So if that story is true, I sure wish it's not, but it gives you an example of people of the past decades maybe want to speak up, but they cannot.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're the only ones that we hear about. You think about all the stuff that happens to the guys and girls that we don't know anything about.
Yeah. There was a story of NASA scientists, I guess it was over 10 years ago, who were suddenly suicided, or they were mugged and shot to death, or, you know, there was all kinds of excuses. One was murdered, and his body was stuffed into a tree. And it this was just dreadful. They were working on some sort of secret project, I think for NASA or some associated or affiliated government program. And they just happened to keep turning up dead. And I guess by stuffing your body in a tree, you're sending a message to others: keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Would you, if you had the opportunity, say you work for the government or anything like that, would you do any whistleblowing? If you was like, you knew more than what you think you should know.
That's a tough call. Probably if I valued my life and my health, I would keep my mouth shut. I don't work for the government, never have.
No.
And if I knew certain secrets, I mean, they could really come down on you. And I understand many times they threaten to go after your family, like your brother, your sister, your mother. They know about you. Yeah. And if you don't care about your life, how would you like to see, let's say, your wife killed or something like that?
I know.
Now, some of these may be empty threats, but some of them may be quite real if you find out someone's been roughed up or the house has been broken into or something.
Well, that's it. Would you be willing to take that risk? That's the main question, isn't it? I know I wouldn't.
Probably not. No, I hate to sound like a coward, but we do value our own lives and, you know, our own sanity. So
I would like to, if you did, you'd always want to be talking about it and tell people what you know.
Yeah, it's a natural human reaction. Oh, I've got a juicy secret. I just got to tell somebody. So a few people have talked. The ones that intrigue me the most are people who are retired. And they figure I'm ill, or I've only got like a year left or 6 months left. Linda Moulton Howe, an investigator here in America, spoke to a man who was ill. I think he had diabetes complications that were getting worse and worse. She called his code name Cooper Stein, and he admitted that he briefed both Eisenhower and Nixon in the 50s on extraterrestrial matters that he personally looked into at President Eisenhower's behest. And that, you know, there's plenty going on, and he had to tell them about it. He said Eisenhower asked pertinent questions back in the 50s, and Nixon just looked, you know, bug-eyed, like he was not well briefed on this. This was a bit of a surprise. And so I think Nixon got an education that day and in the years to come, because Eisenhower knew that Nixon would be the standard bearer of the Republican Party and probably the next president of the United States, and he would have a need to know. Yeah. However, Nixon lost to Kennedy and had to wait 8 years before he assumed the presidency.
Yeah. So do you think Kennedy knew? Do you think he was told anything what was going on?
I think he was told a little bit. He was curious. I've read some documents that said we've got to do something about Kennedy asking too many questions about our operations. People who work for so-called MJ-12 or a secret extraterrestrial science and technology committee looking into what we've recovered and how we can use it in defense and weapons and everyday items and such. Kennedy met with Eisenhower on a number of occasions at Camp David, at the White House, and then Kennedy flew out to meet Eisenhower 3 times during his brief presidency out in Palm Springs, where they held closed-door meetings. I put that in my book that you see here, President Eisenhower's Close Encounters, that JFK and Eisenhower met in hush-hush meetings in Palm Springs on a golf course community home. And something was up, you know, something super secret that couldn't be discussed ever. And so, again, I think this might have been the treaty and the communication with some friendly extraterrestrials and what was going on from visitors from another world. But that is speculation, reasonable speculation on my part, because I wasn't there.
So you're saying about Kennedy knowing also, well, Joe's just put in the chat, that Churchill knew as well. And apparently Adolf Hitler.
Yeah,
They was all at a meeting.
Yeah, an excellent story from a bodyguard of Winston Churchill. I'm sure you've discussed this on your show, who said during World War II, I was standing right nearby Churchill and Eisenhower talking about these so-called Foo Fighters, these orbs, these discs that have been following American and British and Allied planes as they crossed Europe or the English Channel and went on their bombing missions and such. And there were numerous stories like this, and one big one caught Churchill and Eisenhower's attention. And the test pilot, or the RAF pilot who was serving as a bodyguard for Churchill, wrote or told his family, that put it into a letter, that said the two famous men discussed, we better cover this up. It wouldn't be good for people's religious faith, again, that religious factor, and it would be upsetting to the social order. We've got to, gloss over this and not let these details out. So way back in the 1940s, this was the general accepted modus operandi of the government. When in doubt, cover it up, deny, hedge, don't give a straight answer, until we know more. They don't want to touch off a panic.
No. So I forgot what I was going to say. So obviously all this was before Roswell, as you said, it was happening in the 40s. Roswell, 47, was it? 57?
Roswell was July 1947, 2 years after World War II. Yeah. And Eisenhower was in a position of trust for President Truman at the time. I think he was like Army Chief of Staff. And I've seen a few documents where Eisenhower is directing someone to go to New Mexico, of all places, and look into something. The wording is a little vague, but what do you think that could be? Why would there be all this interest suddenly in New Mexico? And it wasn't some dumb weather balloon or spy balloon that had collapsed. There's so many stories there that there's so much smoke and fire that we can pretty much surmise that these accounts that an extraterrestrial craft either crashed on its own or collided with another of its own, that there were actually two crashes in the desert, that these stories are quite real. And again, the government went in, covered it up. They had initially, stupidly, released a report that said, well, we finally got one of these flying discs. And then they changed their mind the next day when higher-ups got a hold of the story and told them, you will keep this clamped down. No discussion of the extraterrestrial aspect. Just tell them it's a weather balloon. Hold up these scraps of fabric and say, oops, we made a mistake. Like the Army is so stupid, they can't tell scraps of a weather balloon from a metallic craft. But somehow they got away with it. The story was hushed for like 3 or 4 decades before we began to find out. Real research shows that there was something otherworldly that came down, and eyewitnesses were threatened, we're going to take your bodies and kill you and put them in the desert where no one will ever find them. That's what the government was telling people in New Mexico, like the chief of police and his family that knew too much. We're going to take care of you good if you open your mouth. They threatened anyone who knew the facts. So hopefully that doesn't go on too much today, but who knows?
I never know. But going back, you said about the photograph of the guy that apparently discovered the crash. It was the picture of him when he's holding up the weather balloon.
Oh, yeah.
And the disappointment in his face. He's just like, really? Is this what I've got to do now?
And one of them has a telegram in his hand, and you can start to read it with modern technology clarifying the photographic image. And it talks about disc, bodies recovered and everything. And I don't find that unreasonable to believe that this was direct orders from those higher up telling him to cover it up. And he was dumb enough to hold this thing in his hand. It was upside down, but you tilt the picture around, and they've had TV specials here in America where they've gone to find the original negative and find out that this is the genuine photograph with a genuine telegram in his hands with direct orders from higher up to cover up the evidence. So it's a fascinating case, and that happened 6 years after my Cape Girardeau, Missouri UFO crash, which happened outside my hometown, where my grandfather was a judge in 1941, and my father was about 5 or 6 years old, not quite
Yeah.
6. And so that's a shocking story before World War II. And I think it was a kind of template for later crashes and recoveries of what to do based on Cape Girardeau. The military came in, hushed it up, gathered up all the evidence, told people this is a matter of national security. This did not happen. You were never to discuss this ever. And they swore people to silence using maybe even a Bible. So that's what they did basically at Roswell and other crashes. And it's somewhat held to this day, but the facts are leaking out. We know more than ever. And I think we can be assured that these things are happening. It's not a fantasy.
No. Do you think he was holding the telegram up on purpose? Do you think that, or he just didn't
That's
realize?
Interesting. I've never thought about that. I always assumed he was incompetent or didn't realize he was absent-minded. Who knows? Maybe he wanted people to realize this dumb, flimsy story we're putting together. Here's the actual facts. If you can just turn this upside down. That's an interesting theory there.
I'm just thinking, because if he's holding it upside down, first look, you're not going to be able to read it. But like you said, his technology's got better.
Right.
He might have not been thinking that at the time. It's like, I'll load it up anyway, kind of like in the background a little bit.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure the people who espouse these public lies to cover the story were not too thrilled. In fact, I think one of them, what's the guy's name, who went out to the site and talked on camera. His name escapes me. He spoke and said this was extraterrestrial. He said this in an interview in the late 80s as he got to be an old man. I saw the bodies. I saw the craft. And when they asked me to attend this press conference and tell the press that it was just a weather balloon, he refused. He's not going to lie about it. And so they let General Ramey or somebody like that, Colonel Blanchard, with orders from General Ramey or something like this, that's when they stepped in and did the job. They did what they had to do. They kept the lid on the story and kept people from talking about, it's just a simple weather balloon. Go back to sleep, America.
Nickname just put Jesse Marcel.
There's the name, yes.
There we go.
We're so old we can't remember certain facts.
I do know the person's name.
I write so many books and I get so many facts crammed into my head that I can't remember everything. But very good. Jesse Marcel Sr. was the man's name.
Yeah. No, thank you, nickname. Quick question. So it's not off track too much. The official alien autopsy video, do you believe that's real or faked?
The Race Antilles footage, I think it's been pretty much proven to be a fake. I don't believe it. It's interesting. It may be very close to what happened. But when you start reading about all the background and all the subterfuge and evasiveness and a few facts that they apparently got wrong, I don't believe that footage is real. No. And that's a shame that somebody hoaxed this. I know. Because it set back believability in the UFO ET field a number of years. And it became a joke here in America, like the alien autopsy. Oh, it's so real. And of course, became the butt of jokes. And that, great. Now we got to start over again and convince people that we are being visited and that the government is covering that up.
Yeah, it's like that over here. Then there's a couple of TV hosts over in the UK, and they did their own version of it a few years later. So
copycatting.
That was probably better than the. I say that was probably better than the original.
Yeah. Well, there are people who will tell you that there really was an autopsy of bodies. You've heard of Bob Lazar?
Yes.
Who worked in America out in Nevada at S4 near Area 51. And he said at one point, I was shown some photographs of autopsy bodies and a quick briefing of mentioning Zeta Reticuli and creatures from another world, since he was working on the propulsion system, figuring out of one of many craft that we had in a large hangar facility out in the Nevada desert. And this could be what's mentioned in this 1989 briefing document that mentions there was Nevada base set up for contact out in the desert and learning more about ETs, their bodies and their biological makeup and their craft and what makes them go. And I think we're thwarted as human beings by metals that we don't possess in our world. So we can't really recreate their craft too well. We can't understand their advanced propulsion, and we can't recreate the metals that went into the makeup of these ships that we recover. So that's a big reason why this has to continue in secret and to struggle and to not have a big breakthrough too much, as long as we can't synthesize the proper metallic elements that advanced aliens from other worlds were able to put together.
No, thank you. Right, I've got some viewers' questions, if you want me to go to them.
Go right ahead, sir.
Excellent. So this one's from Nickname, one of the mods. She wants to know, has Paul ever spoken to anyone in confidence that supports his research and verified events?
Somewhat. I'm in touch with what I call an Uber researcher, a guy who has far more contacts than me. Military, intelligence, media, politicians. He told me after my Nixon-Gleason book came out, and we'll talk more about that in the second hour, that he said, I didn't want to believe it, so I asked all my contacts, and they said, Paul Blake Smith's story is true. Nixon did go to an Air Force base, and he did forge an agreement that surpassed Eisenhower, his old boss, that this was something Nixon really wanted. And my contact says, I can't tell you these people's names. It's like top secret. I would lose all my sources. But Paul, I want to tell you that your book is right on, and that he didn't really think that the Eisenhower story could have been true. And he looked up at that with his sources, and they said also, Paul Blake Smith's story is true. And that these anecdotes that I put all together in both books, these are actual stories. It's not fantasy. And I didn't make up anything as an author. I try to deal with facts only and a reasonable amount of speculation that links things without getting carried away with crazy conspiracy theories. So when you're getting one of my books, you'll see especially in the Nixon book, lots of sources and resources and people that I read of and used. But an actual, like a deep throat kind of contact, not quite really. I would say no. I did speak to someone who worked directly for President Nixon and was on that Florida air trip to Key Biscayne in Miami in 1973. And he says he was even there with Nixon when Jackie Gleason showed up to greet Nixon as he got out of his helicopter. And he said, I thought for sure I was going to be seeing history in the making, Jackie Gleason get his head lopped off because he went running right up to this helicopter with the blades still whirring.
I heard about that.
The only thing that saved him is Gleason was kind of a short man. He was not really tall, and his head was not decapitated at that moment. But there's so many reasons why I can't meet with great sources. It's because stories from the 1941 Cape Girardeau affair, the 54 Eisenhower story, and the 73 Nixon story, they're all dead. Everyone's gone, and in many cases, their children are gone. So that makes it really tough to research today.
No, thank you for that. Still got time before we go for a break, if that's okay with you. Right, so this is from Nickname again. She wants to know, what does Paul think about the disclosure and the recent events in the USA? Great timing for your book. But
I'm excited. I'm excited to a degree. David Grush gave these basic facts at the whistleblowing congressional hearings on national television. But where's a file? Where's a report? Where's some film footage? Where's a photograph? He didn't have any of that. He said, I talked to these people, these experts in the field. They've seen the bodies. They've worked on the craft and everything like that. And I'm thinking, that's great. How about following it up with hard proof?
Well, I had Yeah, I had Preston Dennett and Agnost on last week, and they pretty much said the same thing. Where's the actual
Right.
evidence? The
I'm
photographs,
hoping, yeah, yeah,
an object in your hand
yeah,
showing
exactly.
where
Let's
there's a
see
hanger
something
with some
solid.
craft inside it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe film footage would be very convincing, but even that can be fake nowadays,
yeah,
especially with the advent of artificial intelligence. It's scary what can be done and what can be faked. But if you have some grainy footage that looks like Eisenhower showing off extraterrestrial craft or meeting with aliens or something like that, or President Truman, you'll
yeah.
know, I think, that this footage is real. Now, there's a source from the Vatican who spoke to a Vatican reporter named Cristoforo Barbato. And he
Right.
said, the Vatican source told me they've got footage of Eisenhower at this encounter in 1954 with aliens. Some of it's in black and white, and some footage is in color. And some of the black and white footage ends abruptly because the extraterrestrial craft that was turned on, activated at the time, its technology clashed with the movie camera that was taking the film footage, and it abruptly wrecked that film footage. So that would be amazing. That would be something for the world to see. If the Vatican could leak something, that would be helpful if the American government is not cooperative.
Yeah. Do you think the Vatican will ever release anything? As we all know, the Vatican.
There's official
control
leaking
everything.
and official speaking, and then there's people who work inside governments and inside the Vatican who could leak something on purpose and say, oops, look what got out. Look at this footage that I pressed the wrong button and put it on the internet. Oh, darn it. But so far, we haven't seen a lot of that sort of thing. The Skinny Bob alien, are you familiar with that footage from 1950?
Just before we go to that one, I've just got an add-on bit for this question from Nickname. Is that okay? So this is from Cal Ridley, and similar sort of question, but different detail. Do you think all the stuff in Congress recently is a smokescreen for something else?
I suppose that's possible. I don't know why they would go through these lengths to have even one or two guys step forward and admit to certain things and then cut things off unless they were speaking truthfully, and there are more whistleblowers to come in whatever form. There's a member of Congress, Senator Marco Rubio, who said, we're getting lots of these whistleblowers come up to our congressional committee and telling us some amazing things. And that was not released, or they were not allowed to speak in that congressional hearing. And it makes you wonder what is going on. What is a smokescreen, or what is truthfully being leaked? And then maybe the government's pulling back on this idea and they're going to clamp down on stuff. So I don't have a definite answer for you. We'll just see.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to get that in before you started talking about Skinny Bob, because Nicknames put up Skinny Bob real pics ? So I'm guessing she means, do you believe that the images are legit or not?
I know it's controversial and there are skeptics, but I think that may be the real deal. There are signs that it could be real. And the grainy old footage is film stock from the 40s. It's said to have been released or leaked by the KGB. And there's an authentic KGB logo at the start of this footage that they said it's a very obscure thing. How could, someone faking this come up with that? They looked it up, and there's been comments online that say, I know CGI, and this is not CGI. This is the real deal. And the creature's eyes, the eyelids go down. His head seems to bulb or flare a little bit, and he moves his head and he moves his arms. I think it's the real deal that the KGB were interrogating a friendly alien in 1942. And someone alleges it might have been Julian Assange, somebody like that, purposely leaked it to the internet under the name Ivan something. And it's been utter silence. They promised at the time when it was released to the internet that there would be more footage, and there's nothing. So the debate goes on. It's over 10 years old now, and no one's come forward to say, absolutely, I leaked that, I believe it's real, or no one's come forward and said, I concocted the whole thing, it's a big hoax, here's how I did it. So
Yeah.
it could well be the real deal. And it's exciting, creepy to
Yeah.
look at too.
Oh yeah, because you were saying about the eyes, because even though it's got the eyelids, it has a membrane as well that comes over like an
Right.
amphibian or a reptile, and that was what got me, because I know how a lot of CGI works, and to do something like that on a small part of an image is pretty much impossible.
And what would be the reward? How would you gain from putting together a very believable, sophisticated hoax? It would cost real money to do this back in, what was it, 2011, and to work this up, unless it's the real deal. And as mentioned, not only does the creature move and seems to have been outfitted with a sweater or some kind, but there's like this bulbous part of his head that flares up, or like a pulse in
Yeah.
his, and it's just like, you put in some awfully believable details if you did hoax it. But I think it's the real deal. I think this is the KGB was supposedly in contact, having some communication with landed friendly aliens, and took either secret footage, hidden camera,
Yeah.
or they openly did, because at one point the creature seems to almost smile and move his fingers, and look
Yeah.
around a little bit when they pull back, and that looks like he knows he's being filmed. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
pretty exciting. I want to see more.
So what about the voice? See, that got me. I was like, is that real? Is that the real voice, or has it been changed? Has it been edited?
I don't know.
And it's
Again,
just
I'm not.
really
I wish I
difficult.
was a technology expert and I could tell you one
Sorry.
way or the other, but it's just so enticing. Uh, it sure looks and just feels and smells like the real deal. But
Yeah.
those who leaked it haven't come forward to back it up and say, here's
No.
more information, here's more footage. At one point, there's more than one creature. They're walking around like almost like little infant kids with big bulbous heads. You see this brief
Yeah.
footage, like there's been a crash, and this disc in the background, and it's grainy, black and white, it's faded, and it's so tantalizing. And yet we don't know to this day if it's authentic or not, or if half of it is authentic and someone's pulling a half hoax on us. It's so frustrating.
No, thank you. Right, should we go for a break?
Sounds
Because
good to
we're just
me.
hitting the 1 hour mark. And then
Refill
we'll
my
talk.
water glass.
Yeah, we'll talk about the new book in the second break, and we've still got a few more questions as well.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. There is a 10-second countdown at the end of the break, so if you are running late and that kicks in, you just need to hot foot back to your seat.
I will do plenty of hopping and hopefully on time, sir.
Perfect. Right, I'll see you guys in 5. Bye-bye.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we are back. Perfect timing. You get everything done you needed to, Paul?
I certainly did. I won't go into detail, but yes, I did.
I just ran down, got some soda, and straight back up. So without the running.
Yep. And we've got an hour to fill, and I can talk plenty about my latest book, The Nixon Story, and how it relates to the Eisenhower one, and any other questions you might receive while we're doing the show.
Yeah. Do you want to do these 3 questions from the first half?
Okay.
Right, I'm going to leave the first one till later because it's not relevant at the moment. Right, so I'll do the last 2 first, and then we can come back to the other one. So this one is again from Nickname. Antarctic scientists, does Paul know much about that case?
I'm afraid not. No, I've heard many rumors from television and internet and books that something's going on down there, that they've uncovered possibly an opening in the ice that's most suspicious, or that the Nazis had a base down there and we found things going on. But I know almost nothing more than the average person.
No, thank you. Yeah, there seems to be, I don't know if you go on TikTok or anything like that. There seems to be a lot of videos of Antarctic on TikTok, but how genuine the videos are, that's another story again.
Yeah. Again, we have a problem with people creatively making videos on their own, or even more professional movie makers, filmmakers, videographers creating hoaxes to gum up the works for whatever reason. So
yeah, I know. It's a shame, really, but I think hopefully and eventually we will find out something.
Yeah, that's a far-flung corner of the world that's controlled, like who can go to the Arctic or Antarctic. The Arctic is melting away. There's no landmass underneath it. And there is under the Arctic, and it was once a continent that might have some very interesting remnants of some sort of civilization, if we could only get the ice to melt without threatening all of mankind with rising ocean levels and increased storms and messing with the planet too drastically.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Right, next one is from Jojo, the moderator, and she wants to know, if a craft landed and they offered you to go on board, would you?
Oh boy, that's a good question. If I knew they were friendly, yeah, I would say, you guys met with Eisenhower and maybe with Nixon, and you're friendly and you're human-like and you're not going to hurt me, right? Well, yeah, what the heck?
Yeah, you want a written contract before you get on there.
So many stories of aliens, you don't know whether they're friendly or not, and they're coming towards you, and they are either small, like 5 foot tall at the most, maybe 3 or 4 foot. And if their craft is similarly designed, well, I'm 6'6". I'm not going to fit too well in their ship. And then other stories you read about, well, they were huge, blue, humanoid or reptilian, and they were like 7 foot tall or whatever. I could fit in your ship, but I don't think if you look unfriendly, I'm probably not going to go with you. I know that sounds shallow. And that's a problem I'm sure President Eisenhower had, is that what if these humans that landed and seemed friendly were just a Trojan horse, and that they had a secret agenda to harm him or harm America, that they were just a facade, a shiny front, and that there could be an evil intent, but that did not prove to be the case.
No, thank you. Right, I'm going to leave the last question till later on, because you want to talk about your new book, which is this one. Once I get it.
And so much, I don't know if England recalls Jackie Gleason, the comedian, very well. But Jackie had super popular TV shows in America and made lots of movies and got very, very wealthy. And during his time, he became obsessed with UFOs and ETs in a time in the 50s and 60s where it wasn't all that hip and he could have been labeled like a kook or something. He didn't care.
Yeah.
He just had to have the truth. He collected over 1,700 books on the paranormal, heavy on UFOs, and he read them and studied them and late at night and would call up the Long John Nebel radio show, overnight show in New York City to talk about UFOs. And there's some of these recordings you can catch on YouTube online. The recording quality is terrible, but you could tell Gleason was highly informed and even somewhat skeptical of some UFO stories. He was curious about all of them. And even a custom-built UFO house in New York City, or just outside New York City in Peekskill, New York, where it was round with big bay windows and telescopes and a Tesla coil and ham radios for contacting or searching for aliens. That's how impressed he was. He was willing to spend his money. He wanted the truth on whether we're being visited. And we would call him a bit of a fanatic today, and I suppose he was, but in a positive way. He wanted hard evidence, and he was willing to put up at first $50,000 for anyone who could come forward with the proof of extraterrestrial visitation. So the years went by and he made more and more money. He pumped that up to $500,000. And by 1973, it was $1 million. And Richard Nixon needed that money. His Watergate burglars in early 73 had been caught and were threatening to talk. They were going to talk to investigators and talk to the media. Nixon wanted them silent. And he needed hush money. So I think he took up Jackie Gleason on his $1 million offer. And on February 19th, the exact anniversary of the Eisenhower encounter, 19 years earlier, Nixon followed the Eisenhower format of going on a golf vacation, sneaking away at night while the press was distracted or away. And he took his golfing buddy, Jackie Gleason, to Homestead Air Force Base, south of Miami, near Biscayne, where Nixon lived. And Nixon finally gave Jackie what he wanted. His birthday was coming up. What do you get for the man who has everything in life except what he wants most? Hard proof of aliens. So the story is Nixon showed Jackie the proof that we do have alien bodies and we do have a craft. And maybe even the tip of the iceberg. Jackie went home that night and told his wife what had happened. Came home ashen-faced and haggard, slumped in a chair near midnight. And his wife said, "Where have you been? What's happened to you?" And he blurted out the facts. He said, "I just went to an Air Force base and Nixon showed me the proof of dead aliens. He took me into this laboratory where there were 4 aliens on 4 different examining tables. They were dwarfish, like 2.5 feet tall, with big pointy ears and big bug eyes. And they were not, by the way, the description of the Eisenhower aliens or the Cape Girardeau aliens or the Roswell aliens. They do match a 1955 Hopkinsville, Kentucky alien encounter with a farm family in rural Kentucky who had these little dwarfish aliens with big pointy eyes and big pointy ears and big bug eyes. It's the same exact description. And he said the 4 were laid out on tables, dead, and looked like they were going to be embalmed or had been embalmed. And that Nixon allowed him to look this over and apparently took him over to an Air Force base hangar on the base and took him inside. And there was a craft that was supposedly in there, circular silver disc, and it might have been even activated, that it was up in the air and had to be held down by cables, according to one source. And that Jackie got a look at all of this and was just amazed. He knew this was not a hoax, and he came home deeply rattled and shaken, and his wife learned the facts that night. And she talked about it later in 3 different interviews that got published, and she never changed her story, never embellished it, never retracted it and said, "I was kidding." Jackie was furious the first 2 times these media stories came out and told her, "Don't you talk about this." The 3rd time she spoke, it was some years after Jackie's death. And so Jackie was confronted with the story that his wife told, his ex-wife, and he refused to deny it. He didn't want to talk about it. He could have easily said, this is a lot of nonsense. Get out of here with this foolishness. She made the whole thing up, but he did not. And supposedly in private, a few showbiz friends asked him about, how do you know we're being visited by aliens? And Jackie's grumpy reply was, Nixon showed me the proof. That's all I want to tell you. Nixon showed it to me. And so this confirms that Nixon allowed Jackie to go with him to an Air Force base to see these alien examples of maybe Nixon had to go there to attend to this treaty that Eisenhower first signed on the exact day, February 19th. Can't be a coincidence. And so he used the format that Eisenhower laid out to sneak out to an Air Force base. In this case, Jackie was said he was sworn to secrecy after this event. And naturally, he broke that oath as soon as he got home, all upset. His wife
seconds.
Like, what happened to you? And an important part of the story is that Jackie's ex-wife said in the days after, he was just in an emotional roller coaster. He was so giddy with excitement. I finally got to see the proof. Me above all American citizens. I'm number one. They showed it to me. And I know for a fact now, after all my life, I've been waiting for this. And then he would get really upset. That darn American government, they know we've got the proof. They're looking it over. They're holding on to it and then examining it in scientific labs. And they're telling people we're not being visited, or they ridicule people who come forward with UFO sightings. It made Jackie furious, and he would be very angry, according to Beverly Gleason, who he divorced, I think, in 74 and 75. It dragged on a little bit. And the Jackie Gleason house is another hard proof that Jackie was absolutely obsessed with UFOs and would have badgered Richard Nixon, his golfing buddy, for the facts until Nixon finally caved in and gave him what he wanted, probably in exchange for this $1 million offer. It made sense from Nixon's point of view. He had the means, motive, and opportunity to show it, and Jackie went for it, and Nixon went for it. The two men shared an attorney named Herm Kalmbach, who went to jail for handing out cash to the various Watergate burglars and their families to try to obstruct justice to keep their mouth shut. So we can put all the story together. We can put 2 and 2 together and come up with 4 that the whole thing does make logical sense. And it's not some fly-by-night urban legend or fantasy.
No.
There have been some UFO researchers over the years who have embellished the story, tried to inject themselves in it and say, Jackie told me everything. But the truth was, Jackie called up his wife and chewed her out for talking, and he refused to speak about it. And I think the last thing he would do is talk to a UFO researcher who would immediately go forward to the world and tell, Jackie told me everything, you know. So I think some of those tales that you read online are fantasies. But the basic truth told by Jackie's wife is the truth, that Jackie did confess to this, and it all makes sense. I looked up Nixon's presidential records. The file ends at 8:30 that night, and it says a page has been removed from the presidential digital files of Nixon's schedule that night. The next thing you know, he's back up on February 20th, the next morning, eating breakfast, going about his routine in Key Biscayne, Florida. So there's another example. We can't see what he was up to, but it's so suspicious that the very time of the Nixon-Gleason allegation, you don't get to see his files. So what does that tell you?
Definitely
suspicious.
Yeah, it just seemed, it's like anything. Whenever the truth starts to show itself, it's taken away. The moment anyone starts to grasp onto what's really going on, it's like, oh, no, someone's looking, quick, hide it. That's what it seems to be with everything.
When you have a court case in America, you enter into evidence something somebody blurted out while they were full of emotion at the time of the crime. It's called an excited utterance. And that's pretty much what we can do with Jackie's confession to his wife when he blurted out the truth. She said he came home near midnight and said, Nixon showed me the truth at this Air Force base, and told her some details about what he saw. He may not have told her everything. that Jackie was so shook up and so pale that it makes you think Jackie saw even more than what he told his wife. So his wife has described this as best she can. She doesn't care to give interviews and write a tell-all book, but she did describe the same story in 3 interviews. I think she's still alive. I could not locate her for my book, and I asked a UFO researcher who knew a lot of people, and he couldn't find her either. So she's getting to be about 90, and I think she's told her tale, and she doesn't care to say it again. She told everything she knows. So it makes sense that Nixon did this and that he took Jackie along for the money.
Right. But do you think, like you said, so he took Jackie with him. Do you think he knew, do you think Nixon knew that Jackie might tell his missus or somebody else?
I think
Do you
Nixon
think it
trusted
was,
Jackie. Yeah, I think Nixon trusted Jackie to keep his mouth shut.
All right.
Jackie told his wife, before we left the base that night, the president swore me to secrecy. So Nixon probably thought that's enough. He's not going to open his mouth. But Jackie drank a good deal, and when he came home, he started drinking. And that gives you another clue that sometimes that loosen your lips. In an emotional mood, you might tell all, especially when your wife is deeply concerned, because you look like you've just seen a ghost almost, and you have to explain where you've been. Jackie was hosting a golf tournament, a celebrity golf tournament at that time. That very afternoon, Nixon landed at his golf course in a helicopter and spoke to the press with Jackie by his side on Monday, February 19th, 1973, with the press gathered around. So the two men did meet that day in public. And so it makes sense that Nixon sent a helicopter back to that golf course where Jackie lived. He had a golf course home on the 18th green. And it would have been a short walk for Jackie to go over to that helipad, get aboard a helicopter, fly over Miami, and go to Homestead Air Force Base and meet Nixon there and be flown back. And it all holds together that the pilot would have had the experience and the coordinate to land as he did that afternoon. Could have easily done so. So the story holds together when you investigate it. And I wish, again, there was hard proof or a file that we could get our hands on, or photographs or film of the two men together. I don't think any film footage was taken of the two men, like a newsreel or whatever. But this was a secret that Nixon probably wanted to keep, and he never spoke about it, but Jackie did.
So do you know any repercussions for Jackie for him opening his mouth?
I don't. He continued to entertain celebrities, including President Ford, 2 years later at his celebrity golf tournament. So I think he was still trusted. He continued to keep his mouth shut and have no comment on what his wife was talking to the press about, what she learned from him. And the story kind of faded. Now, I've been told that in his last movie, Nothing in Common, with the famous actor Tom Hanks, that Jackie did talk, that he spoke to some people there on the set, that Nixon did show me this. The story's true. I couldn't confirm that. And I doubt if Tom Hanks would talk to me. It would be nice if he would. If you're watching, Tom, I'd like to hear some details of what Jackie might have said. But that still remains sketchy. That's kind of a rumor. Jackie died shortly after that movie came out. He had all kinds of health problems. If he released a statement, it hasn't surfaced. If he gave a deathbed confession, that has not surfaced. He died in June of '87. So the story has kind of just sort of laid there, but now we can put the pieces together in alignment with the Eisenhower encounter and see how this could have happened and why it happened. That there was apparently a treaty with aliens that Nixon may have needed to go to the base and attend to anyway. So that Gleason just saw some of this going on as a guest, and maybe more was going on after Gleason was taken home by helicopter.
So it's like, suppose he's seen it and thought, "Oh, this is interesting. I want a bit of this."
I'm
best mates with the president.
Who's better than that? Everyone, wouldn't you?
To know.
It's very interesting. On the 20th anniversary of the Eisenhower encounter and a treaty signed, apparently, in February of '74, 1 year after Jackie went with Nixon, Nixon's records show that he did go back to Key Biscayne February like 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and he flew back to the White House in time for the 19th of February, which would have been the exact 20th anniversary. And it's very suspicious that pages were removed from that part of the digitized Nixon presidential records, and very little was recorded at the time. Like he took a phone call one day and he met with somebody another day. Usually the records are full of information of exactly who Nixon spoke to on the phone, who he met with in person. It goes on from like 8 in the morning to like 9 or 10 at night in some cases, if you go through Nixon's digitized files, as most anyone can to confirm this. So in February of 74, it's very suspicious that he probably ordered people not to record what he was up to on this golf vacation near Homestead Air Force Base. And he visited Homestead almost every time he went to Florida, 55 times during his presidency. He was very familiar with Homestead, just south of Miami. And in the years after the Nixon-Gleason encounter, Homestead Air Force Base was nearly wiped off the map by a hurricane, and it's been rebuilt as something a little bit different now. So, and the Nixon house in Key Biscayne, that was wiped out by a developer who bulldozed it. You can't go there. And Jackie's house is still around, but it suffered fire damage once. So it's as if everyone associated with this event in 73 has been cursed in some manner. And they're passed on, and they didn't have a happy ending. Nixon resigned in disgrace. Jackie's career kind of fluctuated, and his health went really downhill, and he passed away of a variety of diseases, including cancer. So it's kind of a sad story when you look at things in the long term.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting with you saying that the amount of times that he visited Homestead.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's something there that's caught his attention.
He used Homestead to land Air Force One and transfer to a helicopter that would take him to a helipad right behind his Key Biscayne house. And he went there 55 times during his 6-year presidency, when, remember, Nixon had a home in San Clemente, California. That's the Nixon estate, and he went there many, many times. What was he doing in Florida, so many times in and out of Homestead Air Force Base, unless there was some exciting, juicy extraterrestrial contact and bodies and issues that had to be attended to? Then it starts to make sense.
Yeah, it's not like it's round the corner. It's what, 4,500 miles away?
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
it was a summer house he just had to purchase, if you want to call it that, a Southern White House. And it wasn't fancy in Key Biscayne. It was a cinder block home, and it was like one story on the waterfront with a helipad put in behind it, so that Nixon could go down and visit Homestead and be in Key Biscayne. And a number of people who have worked for Nixon wrote books and said, we got almost nothing done in Key Biscayne. I don't know why we were down there so often. Even to them, it seemed strange. They were not let in on why Nixon seemed to have to go on this Florida vacation so often. So what he was doing, we can speculate reasonably that something otherworldly may have been going on that he wanted to look into.
Yeah, it just seems a bit too much of one thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you wanted to vacation, presidents in the past have stayed at the homes of friends in various parts of the country. Like Eisenhower would go fishing in Vermont or Colorado. He would stay with friends in California or something like that, stay in their homes. Ike loved to go golfing in Augusta, Georgia. And they built him a home on the Augusta National Golf Course down there. So that Nixon also started going on golf vacations, and he just had to go to Florida. And it makes you wonder, again, what was he doing down there so often when they weren't getting any official work done?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe's just put in the chat, I wonder where Churchill went. Did he ever go, do you know?
That's an interesting subject. I think he knew more than most people might realize. He was in government for so long and into the 50s, and a good friend of Eisenhower. some months after the Eisenhower encounter, in fact, maybe within weeks, he asked Eisenhower for a summit. And Eisenhower was wondering, well, why should we have a summit? We just had one in December of 53. We met down in the Caribbean. And now we might get an educated guess that Churchill got wind of the Eisenhower alien encounter and wanted to learn all the facts in person. He flew all the way across the Atlantic and met with Eisenhower in the White House, closed door meeting in, I think, June of 54, some months after Eisenhower's encounter at Edwards Air Force Base. So even that is a bit suspicious. We don't know for sure. It's just conjecture, but you got to believe that if Churchill even got a whiff of this, he'd be curious. He'd want to know everything.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm just wondering, were there any more meetups that not many people know about in different parts of the world? Not just with them,
yeah, I get that question
them
too.
three.
Yeah, I get that question. There's the story of Lord Mountbatten and his estate out in the English countryside where an eyewitness said he saw a craft on the lawn. I think in 55, it might have been the case of meeting with someone very powerful in the British monarchy. And we've heard many times Prince Philip had a huge UFO book collection that may have rivaled Jackie Gleason's. This was a real obsession with him in private. I haven't seen anyone denying it and saying, that's not true. But I wish we could see the books themselves. But I'm sure it's something the royal family wanted to be keeping hushed up and not discussing or exposing. But I've read that many times that Prince Philip, the husband of the Queen, wanted to know all the details. And so my publishers sent them a copy of President Eisenhower's Close Encounters in the last months of his life. And I don't know if they got it. I hope he did. He might have been reading my book in the weeks before his demise. So that would be interesting if there's a copy of my book in his collection to this day. What they've done with it, I don't know. Jackie's collection was donated to the University of Miami. You can see the Jackie Gleason UFO books for yourself if you go down there to their special reading room. And who knows what kind of notes he could have written in the side margins and on pages and such. So that would be quite fascinating.
No, thank you for that. Very interesting. Because it's like Cal's just put in the chat, why were the meetings in America and not the UK? I'm guessing because the encounters happened in America and
I think
the people involved are American.
Mostly because of Eisenhower's dedication to these atomic bomb tests that were being done in Nevada and the South Pacific. Yeah. One of them was called Castle Bravo, and it was a huge ecological disaster. It was a couple weeks before or after, I'm afraid to say, the Eisenhower encounter. And it makes you wonder if the aliens who landed were studying us and knew it would be a total mess. And it was detonated in the South Pacific, and it had widespread contamination. The explosion was far greater than what American scientists originally figured. And it was an enormous controversy, and it embarrassed Eisenhower in 54. And he had to start apologizing, and he stubbornly stuck with the tests, which ran out in May of 54. So if the aliens did urge him to stop, supposedly, as I put in my book, an eyewitness said Eisenhower told them, well, I'm not going to disarm unilaterally. I want to see other nations stop testing and stop producing bombs too. Yeah.
No, thank you. Got a couple more questions. Right, I'm just checking the time. So this next one's from Cal again, and she wants to know, how was Gleason allowed to see something top secret?
When February 1973 came around, Nixon had just been reelected in a landslide. He was king of the hill in America, and whatever he said goes. He was nicknamed King Richard of the imperial presidency. He got his way in doing anything. All American presidents, believe it or not, had died. He was the only U.S. president left alive. Truman, Johnson, Kennedy, they were all dead by February of 73. So even J. Edgar Hoover and Allen Dulles, FBI and CIA directors, were dead. So Nixon felt emboldened to do whatever he wanted. And if he wanted to take his golf buddy, fellow conservative Jackie Gleason, who was a financial contributor to his campaigns, to a top secret UFO base, or air base that had UFOs, to put it more succinctly, Nixon did it, and no one would challenge him. He was king of the hill, and if you didn't like it, too bad, I'm sure. Nixon even fired the director of the CIA in the weeks before the Gleason trip to the Air Force Base. I'm not sure if that was related or not, but the CIA would have wanted to know what was going on, and Nixon replaced him with his own handpicked successor. So there's another possible clue that Nixon set this up in advance and knew what he was doing. And you didn't talk back to him. He was super popular at the time, but for the rest of 73 and 74, his popularity just slowly went downhill as the Watergate scandal unraveled and all these revelations came forward in the press and in Congress that Nixon was up to no good. And again, he resigned and disgraced, the only U.S. president to do so.
Yeah. So say from the later presidents, say from Reagan up to present day with Biden, do you think they've had much involvement with any of these outer worldly humanoids and crafts?
It's a good question, and we can only speculate a little logically based on what some of our ex-presidents go on national television here in America and say. Bush, Clinton, and Obama have gone on talk shows, and God bless them, the hosts of the talk shows will ask them directly, are we being visited? Have you seen reports on UFOs? And they give these flippant answers, and they won't give you a straight answer. And I think that tells you our answer, that they know more and they're not going to talk about it because it is going on and they've been instructed to keep quiet. I think the two you named, Reagan and Bush, the elder Bush, both knew what was going on. I've been doing research for a possible sequel to Eisenhower and Nixon on Ronald Reagan's close encounters. He actually saw a UFO on one or two occasions. And I think he was most curious, and he knew some things. He had a briefing from what I read and was told some things. And Mr. Bush is a former director of the CIA. I'm pretty sure he knew a good deal too.
Just
and
a little
at one point, he was helping to campaign for his son Jeb at a campaign rally. And someone asked Mr. Bush, can you tell us about UFOs? And he got all huffy and snapped and said, well, I know some things and I'm not going to tell you because people can't handle it, or something close to that effect. And the rally was, question and answer period was quickly closed off. And the guy who asked the question was hustled out of there. So Mr. Bush, did kind of play his cards a little and say, well, I know some things and I'm not telling you. And so A, that tells us there's something going on, and B, that it's top secret. So what presidents Biden and Trump may have known, I'm a little in the dark. They don't want to talk about it. Trump wants back in the presidency and Biden wants another term, so they know to be discreet. So I don't think we're going to get anything out of either one of them, sadly.
So what about Clinton? Anything?
Hillary Clinton's the interesting one. She said during the 2016 campaign, I find this subject interesting and I'm going to look into this and I'm going to get back to you. But she didn't achieve the power of the presidency on her own. She had one of her husband's top aides, John Podesta, and his now famous curiosity on UFOs and looking into this matter. He was helping Hillary. And it's rather tragic that we didn't get a President Hillary who looked into the subject and would talk to us even-handedly about what she could explain, and keep something secret. We'll never know now.
No, but do you think she could have just been saying that to get in power, to become president?
That could be. It would be an odd thing for her to have said, though.
Yeah,
As someone, Earl Grey points out again,
yeah,
Obama appeared on a talk show and said flippantly, "I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you," because that's a comedy answer, and yet it's very telling
yeah.
because
It's
he could
tongue in
tell you,
cheek,
but
isn't it?
top secret stuff, and he would be in trouble, and that the person who learned it would be in trouble
Yeah.
because they're keeping the lid on this a little longer. There's a man named Ramirez, I think John Ramirez is his name, who says
Yes.
he's been in the CIA and he knows this subject pretty well. And he said the government wants to keep the lid clamped down for a few more years until the year 2027 for whatever reason. And
Yes.
that may be the case.
Someone was telling me about 2027, either yesterday or today.
Oh, okay. What did
That's
they say?
that when it's all going to be like drip fed sort of thing, but in 2027, it's just going to be boom. It's
Wow.
there.
Something to live for, unless the government rubs us
Yeah,
both
so-
out. It is intriguing. You don't know if the guy's telling the truth or his actual background, but if he is, something's coming in the coming years that will almost force the subject, and the government doesn't really want to let too much out. This recent congressional hearing might have been something, a little drib or drab here, an admission here, to brace us up emotionally for the next few years, and then 2027, as you say, boom, whatever boom will be.
Yeah. And sorry, Kaz Clark has just put about what Trump said when he was addressing a full room of officers about Space Force singled out General Dunford and instructed him to go get it. What is the it?
What is it? Is that the hard
Yeah.
proof of the files, or what is it? I don't know. That's an interesting story. I wish we could get our politicians in this country pretty much live up to that oath that they take of secrecy and silence.
Yeah.
They too want their health care and pension after they're done in the presidency. They want Secret Service protection. They may be jeopardizing all of that if they start talking, just like anyone from the government or the military. So it behooves them to keep their mouths shut.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone's just put in the Elaine Cosham's just put just wrote time travel. But that was one thing I wanted to hit on with you. So when these meetings took place, and all these talking about us not burning the planet down as such, and we need to start looking after it. But do you know if they was told anything about of any technology that they would be giving us or showing us how to use?
Yeah. I was told, or rather, I read a source that said one of the things the Eisenhower encounter aliens said to Dwight Ike was, we've got a new energy system we'd like to give you, clean energy. And that he turned them down. You just want to strangle the guy, because he thought it would have a huge economic impact. Our way of life would be drastically altered. And again, it would alter the stock market. It might damage the economy, put people out of work, and Eisenhower could not get reelected. He wanted a second term. He didn't want to rock the boat. And he wanted people to continue to put their faith in God and Jesus Christ. And so he turned them down on a clean energy system. That's an allegation. I can't confirm it, but I put that in my book, and that they did come to an agreement that they would allow certain landings and meetings in private between intelligence personnel from America and friendly human aliens, and we would provide them a little technology and biological specimens, and they would provide some in exchange. And as far as I know, that could well have been done in private in Nevada for years, if not decades.
Yeah.
It's in that 1989 briefing document that I include in the back of both of my books. The bulk of it is in the Eisenhower book, and for some reason the publishers accidentally left off the last 8 pages, which are key. So now those pages are in the back of the Nixon book that's out now from Foundations Publishing.
maybe you're giving too much away and they're removing pages from your books. That's what it is, Paul.
I think it was a snafu with the publishers, but who knows? But it is
Yeah,
in
you,
the Nixon book this time. So you can read about this and maybe the exact wording of what agreement they came to with these extraterrestrials that Eisenhower met and came to an understanding with. Certainly, it was not a compact that was signed by Congress. So you wonder about the legality of this, but it's, again, something you're trying to keep hushed up, and you don't go to the public and you don't trust members of Congress to keep their mouths shut. So it's a complicated issue. And again, it would be like opening a can of worms for Eisenhower. If you made an agreement with one race, what about all the others that could be coming out here?
Well, that's it. You've started the ball rolling, haven't you?
Yeah. I've read a number of times that sources today think we may be visited by 12 different intelligent advanced species, most of them friendly or at least sort of benign, allowing us to do our thing and not getting involved. And that maybe one or two of them are not so friendly. And I'm sure the government is worried that we will lump all aliens in as either friendly or unfriendly and misunderstand the situation.
Yeah.
But I find it extremely difficult to think we're going to be invaded, that there's a hostile alien attack coming. We are now all armed to the max, private citizens and governments with all kinds of weaponry and chemical weapons and atomic weapons. And we're unearthing parts of the planet that are unleashing bacterial pandemics and viruses and germs. And it's more dangerous than ever to come here for an alien. You can get shot in America just for turning around in somebody's driveway and they get suspicious and open fire on you. So I think it would be very, very foolish for aliens to come and try to set down now into citizens' property or on the White House lawn or such.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Paul. Got a few more questions. Right. So, there's more of a statement. So this is from Kaz Clark. She's saying that Trump was given an award by General Yardley on behalf of all space fighters. What are they fighting?
Yeah, when Trump put together Space Force, I'm thinking, for what reason? What are they doing? What does Space Force do? I've never gotten a straight answer. These Air Force personnel, maybe some from NASA, have joined this, and what is it that they do? I'm baffled. I can't give you a straight answer, and why someone would get an award for space fighters. They call them Space Force here. If they're fighting something, what are they fighting? But
well, I'm guessing these are the same or similar to these super soldiers.
Yeah, are they doing something up in space
It sounds like that.
Space station? Or are they going up in a highly advanced American craft that can go into the upper atmosphere? Or are they having contact at an air base? I don't know. There's so much going on that our government doesn't want to tell us, and we may never know.
That's it. Have they got stargates or portals or wormholes or something to get them from here to wherever?
That's a frustrating factor for all the skeptics out there. Oh, it would take light years, hundreds of light years to go between planets. Well, you're not taking into account that these are advanced extraterrestrials that may be harnessing wormholes, stargates, portals in dimensional rifts, and such, and things that our science is just now accessing and starting to dig into, interdimensional realities beyond this world that advanced aliens can manipulate, maybe even using teleportation to think themselves from place to place, assembling the molecules from place to place. So we're still learning. We're still growing, and we're still kind of a crude race that's prone to a little violence or negative behavior. And so there's only so much that we can handle, I guess.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just got a stretch, and no one wants to see that. Back starting to ache. Sorry, Paul.
That's
but it's like
I'll stretch for you there and keep the folks entertained.
There we go.
We're in our final 5 or 10 minutes here, so any more questions?
Yeah, we've got a few more. Next one is from Nellie Kelly. Could it be possible an agreement that was made way back when it all would be start to be revealed in 2027?
Certainly possible. That would not meet up with the exact anniversary date, like 50 years later, but it could be something that we've worked our way up to from an agreement years ago, and that the aliens agreed to. Who knows? What I'm worried about is the state of the planet and its stability on its axis, as we keep hearing about the melting of the polar ice caps, changing the shape of the North Pole area, changing the tides, the currents, rising water levels, and if this planet is stable on its axis or could slip over, which has been forecast by a number of psychic sources, and now scientists are looking more seriously at this. And I wonder if that's something in our future, and that could be a reason why extraterrestrials are coming here to observe us as we deteriorate and destroy our environment through global warming and the ozone layer having negative aspects that are coming to the fore with wild storms, wild temperatures, crazy weather. And it just seems to get worse and worse, as you and I were talking before we went on the air about America and Phoenix, or Hawaii is burned to the ground, and just insane kind of stuff. Australia burned a couple of years ago, unprecedented wildfire. And in Canada, sending smoke, unprecedented amounts of smoke over North American cities. It's getting crazier and scarier.
Yeah. So do you think that is to do with our own environment, or could it be something else?
I don't blame aliens, but there's some natural excuses, such as volcanoes going off, their pollution blocking the helpful rays of the sun. More volcanoes seem to be going off than ever in the past few years. Mount Etna apparently erupted in a major way recently. That's a frightening scenario where it could trigger more in the area. What worries me most of all is Mount Vesuvius, which is something the psychic Edgar Cayce said would happen in the coming years, that it would blow in a major, major eruption. And when that happens, he said, the west coast of America will suffer terrible earthquakes. So that hasn't happened yet. Casey's been right about a number of things. Hopefully this will not take place. Who knows? Maybe this is what's coming in 2027, a real mess.
Yeah. But you're just saying about volcanoes, the one that went up in Iceland a few years back.
Yeah.
Look at the effect, just from that one, look at the effect on the Northern Hemisphere that made.
It altered airline flights. There was so much filth in the atmosphere. And it seemed to come out of nowhere. And it just made a total mess. And that's just one of several. Alaska has a number of going off, and the Pacific Rim is always a little unstable. And Hawaii has had one, I think Mauna Loa. And I was surprised to find that had nothing to do with the giant wildfires that burned so many people's homes. That was a different island, and that the forest fires that went off recently were fanned by a hurricane that went over the islands and made things worse. It didn't put out the fire. It just blew the fire around worse. So there's just a whole variety of disasters in Hawaii.
Yeah. But I think it was earlier on today, I watched a video on TikTok again on Hawaii, and it was showing that all the houses had burnt down, but the fire didn't do any damage to the surrounding trees.
I've seen both badly damaged, looking like a bomb, like an atomic bomb went off. And even boats in the water, people went down to get in the water, and some of that wasn't safe. That boats caught fire, and there's fires going off in the water as you try to find safety. And of course, people couldn't breathe clean air, and they suffocated or choked to death. And it's just a terribly tragic story. And I fear more of this could be coming in various parts of the world as our environment changes drastically. And yet you still have these people who claim, oh, there's nothing unusual going on. Stick your heads in the sand. There's no global warming or climate change whatsoever. And you just want to bash your head against a wall. That there is some going on man-made, and there is some going on made augmented by the forces of nature, but it's real and it's happening, and we can't deny it.
No, thank you for that, Paul. Right, we've just got 3-4 more. Is that okay?
Sure.
Right. So this is from Kaz Clark again. Biological specimen. Oh, can't speak anymore. Biological specimens. Does that include human beings?
This document refers to more like plant and animal, I think, specimens.
Right.
I hope it's not humans, but what if you had a cadaver, let's say, of a homeless person? That might do. You assume that humans in government are not killing Americans to provide the bodies, and you hope and assume that aliens are not killing humans to examine. We don't know, but we need technology, and we want to know more about them, and we have to provide for the aliens who have landed according to this treaty. So I can't give an absolute 100%, but I hope not. I hope there's no human bodies, but that might be something that aliens want to learn more about. If not, abduction and probes and then putting you back. It's another unpleasant subject, but maybe we could talk about that some other time, maybe with another guest.
Definitely.
It's kind of scary there.
Yeah.
That and cattle mutilations. That's not a favorite subject of mine either. It's scary stuff.
No. Right. This is from Elaine Cosham. She was told we can do time travel, but we haven't got the vehicle yet to withstand it. Any thing on that?
I don't know too much about that. Colonel Philip Corso, the American military who worked for Eisenhower, wrote the book the day after Roswell. And he said that they had Army engineers look at the crash recoveries, and they said some of their propulsion system changed time in a small manner, changed time around it. And they used to call it the time machine, but it gave you an indication that aliens may have had some of this kind of technology and ability. So could this happen? I don't know. Time travel seems awfully dicey to me, in that no one ever seems to come back and change the future, like attacking President Trump, or they never stop JFK from being murdered. They don't stop Martin Luther King or John Lennon from being assassinated. If you go back in time, they must not be doing much, just kind of blending in. No one seems to alter the human course of events.
Yeah, see, I've always thought about this, and you see it in a lot of movies, like when they go back and they change the timeline, and then the effects are worse if they save that person or alter whatever's happened in the past.
Right.
So then they've gone back again to put it back to how it was originally.
It's a fascinating subject, and I don't know what's even being attempted, but you do see the occasional videos, and here I've seen one on TikTok recently about a man who called into an American radio show hosted by Art Bell some years ago, and gave some intelligent, believable sounding information about time travel, and then he never called back. So, I don't know what to tell you.
But just thinking about it then, could time travel, if they do go back and adjust something, could that then be the Mandela effect? Because the timeline shifted. Could that be some vibration of what's happened in the shift?
Yeah. If you've seen the movies, they've recreated Star Wars or Star Trek, I believe, and they call it the Kelvin timeline. By going back in the past, they changed a few things, and Mr. Spock comes back as the younger version, and he can speak to the older version because they altered the past. Can that happen? I don't know. This caller who called into the Art Bell show said, I did go back and visit my younger self. And who knows? Was he just making up a fantasy, or did he tell the truth?
That's it. We'll
it's
never
mind-blowing,
know. Unless we're there, we wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Would you want to talk to an older, more mature version of yourself who comes back in like your bedroom and, hey, what's up, me?
I go back and talk.
Yeah.
I talk to a younger version of myself.
Yeah.
Don't do that, and don't go there on that time.
The older version of yourself, like you accidentally put out a gun and shoot your older version, like, then what happens? It's just weird.
Yeah, it's just, you can't even begin to think of what could happen. Right, we've got 2 more. Is that okay?
Sure.
So, Kaz Clark again. Is it true the Americans took the Stargate from Iraq?
I wasn't there, but I have read this. It's quite the popular rumor in America that we found some sort of Anunnaki Stargate technology that maybe Saddam Hussein was working on or had possession of, and this was one of the reasons we went in there. I can't confirm or deny. It's intriguing, tantalizing. I'd like to learn more, but boy, would that be top secret, and would that be exciting if we got our hands on that? Would it be necessary if we are already making contact with friendly races who give us a little technology and instruct and guide us since the Eisenhower era? I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe they told us where it was.
Yeah, good. Yeah, possibly.
You never know. Maybe they need it to help stay in contact with us.
Yeah.
There's a number of possibilities behind
if you're
the reasoning.
Advanced aliens, why don't you go in and get it yourself?
Yeah. Well, there is that. Strange, very strange. Right, so last question, and this is one that I was holding back from, and this is from Nickname, and she'd like to know, what will Paul be writing about next?
I do have quite an accumulation of information on Ronald Reagan, that he may have seen a spacecraft in the 50s. He certainly said he saw one in the 1970s. His pilot at the time has given interviews and said, Reagan and I were flying over California near Bakersville one night, and we saw this disc, this light, and it followed us for a while. And Reagan was all excited and talked about it to a couple of different sources. I'd like more information, but if anyone knows more about what Reagan was up to as president or in the years leading up to, I would look into that. And I'm trying to form a new book that might be a sequel to both Eisenhower and Nixon. Reagan was a friend to both men, and he may have been clued in on what was going on.
Yep. No, thank you for that, Paul. Right, we are reaching the 2-hour mark, so we're going to end it here. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely amazing.
It's been fun to think of all the possibilities and discuss what's going on and what could be going on. And if you want to read more, go to Amazon.com, and all of my books are there under Paul Blake Smith.
And I will put, there we go, it's a clearer picture on this one. So that's the latest book, the Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter. And the one previous to this is the President Eisenhower Close Encounter.
Oh, you got it right there.
I got it without having to read it then.
You were worried about it, but you got it right. All right. Well,
I always get
the theme mixed up.
No, it's been great, Paul. Thank you for coming on. And please do keep putting the posts up on LinkedIn, because, like I said, it's pretty much you and Dan Baldwin that keep me going throughout the day.
Okay. At least one a day.
Yeah.
All right. You got a deal.
Yeah. So are you good to hang on until we've come out the outro and have a quick chat off air?
Very well.
Or do you need to get going?
I'll be all right if you have anything else to impart secretly without your viewers finding out.
Yep. No, that's all good. Right, I'll just let everyone know. Next Wednesday, it's me and Chris from Scottish Paranormal Podcast. We're going to be talking about the latest UFO disclosure. There is no stream next Friday because I'm going to the Manchester Awakening Expo that's hosted by, it's Steve Meara and Barry Fitzgerald that are doing that. That's a 2-day event. I'm going to try and do a live stream at some point, hopefully while I'm there. If not, it'll be at my cousin's house where I'm staying over the weekend. So failing that, it'll be the following Wednesday, I think. Sorry, Paul, I'll just get my calendar up. So it's me and Chris. Then nothing on the Friday, as in travelling up to there. Oh, this Friday, I've got Nick Valente coming on from North American Dogman Project. And then a week on Wednesday, I've got Graham Phillips coming on, who's a good friend of Andrew Collins. So please do all tune in for that. Thank you everyone for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure again, Paul. Great questions in the chat. Thank you to everyone that listens on podcast and the people that keep subscribing. And those of you that want to become Patreon member, it's £3.99 a month. That's less than £1 a week, and definitely less than a pint of lager. So do join; it'll be worth it. So thanks again, Paul, and we'll see you all on Wednesday. Take care and goodbye.